Hello again everyone and welcome back to the Underground. This is the Intel update for July 7th through the 13th, 2024. So let's get right to it. Starting off with the Northeast region, in Washington, D.C., there was a somewhat minor incident involving a Supreme Court justice. So this has kind of become a trend over the past few months, really past couple of years, I guess, in which high-ranking politicians, justices, so on and so forth, are really just kind of feeling the impact of the routine street crime in Washington, D.C., and Justice Sotomayor is no exception. So a few days ago, her security detail was sitting outside her house in unmarked vehicles, and someone attempted to carjack them. So the would-be carjacker, produced a firearm and was shot, I think, 4 times by the security team. The assailant was not killed in this attack and was hospitalized for non-life-threatening wounds. So, yeah, just kind of a really sort of random crime incident. It doesn't look like this was more of a targeted sort of attack kind of thing. This was really just more of a routine street crime kind of thing that affected yet another high-ranking politician. Also in Washington, D.C., I briefly wanted to mention that Boeing has agreed to plead guilty to, I think, a couple of felonies. I haven't seen the paperwork quite yet, but they have agreed to plead guilty to criminal charges that have stemmed from a 2018 and 2019 crashes in which Boeing was responsible for those crashes due to a myriad of reasons, but mostly for faulty parts. So, as we all know, Boeing has been in the news quite a lot over the past couple of years related to their sort of substandard manufacturing process and the really sharp downturn in quality that Boeing has become rather infamous for over the past couple of years. This has been made worse by the somewhat mysterious circumstances by which quite a few Boeing whistleblowers have met an untimely end. So, again, it's one of those things where we don't really have a whole lot of information to go on, but it is very, very, very suspect. So, these 2 crashes killed a total of 338 people, and that's not including, if you wanted to factor in the casualties for that, the mysterious deaths that have occurred among whistleblowers. That's up to you if you want to factor those in. But Boeing has pled guilty, and they will pay a fine of $243.6 million. Now, just to kind of put in perspective how much this fine is going to hurt Boeing, it's just a drop in the bucket. It's really not going to affect them at all. I'm sure they've probably already written it off already. Depending on which math you want to use, and this kind of gets really sketchy because I was trying to find out how much money Boeing makes in a day. And it's actually really hard to find out, considering that, well, you've got what Boeing generates in revenue every, year, what they publicly disclose, which is, $70 billion or something like that, $77 billion. However, you have to factor in their costs as well, which, I forgot to do initially. But there's also the subsidies they get. So Boeing gets a lot of these operating costs. They're tax write-offs for one, or they are just straight up subsidized by the federal government. So you can't really say how much Boeing makes in a day. It's really hard to do that, considering that, they're also a publicly traded company. So, this gets really, really complicated really quickly. However, it's, if you want to take like the most forgiving in terms of Boeing's data, if you want to take the most forgiving data, this is about 10 days worth of profits for Boeing. So, after operating costs and after the worst case, numbers are factored in. I think it's probably way less than that, but again, it's just, they kill hundreds and hundreds of people intentionally, and they plead guilty to such, and, there you go. It's not a super good situation all around. But I did want to mention it just, lest we forget, sort of thing. Moving down to the Southeast region, let's talk briefly about a more controversial issue, which has kind of worked its way through the sort of veteran military community over the past few days as being a very, very highly inflammatory incident. So a few days ago, this image here appeared on social media as kind of like a soldier whistleblowing, so to speak. A slide from a training event that occurred down at Fort Bragg. Now, as you can see on the slide, it's fairly inflammatory, and it lists a lot of pro-life groups as terrorist groups, which they are not. These are peaceful groups. They're not designated as terrorist groups, but the big scandal from this comes from the sort of idea that military police units, or at least one military police unit at Fort Bragg, is considering these groups to be terror groups, and they're not. These are people who are engaging in peaceful, constitutionally protected activity, and now soldiers are labeling them as terrorists. So, again, for those of you who have been kind of following this sort of situation over the past few years, through the huge shenanigans that was the extremism stand down of a couple of years ago, no one's going to be surprised by this at all. However, I think a lot of people probably are, and this is kind of snowballing into a bigger scandal, I think, once people realize what this actually means. On the slide itself, it references a pro-choice license plate that you can get from the DMV. So, among other problems with this, I think this incident is going to kind of snowball once people realize how serious of an incident this really is. This isn't just, some random soldier doing a PowerPoint slide. This is really just kind of a very, very small incident, to be sure. A case study, absolutely. One isolated incident, for sure. Except that it's not that isolated. This has been going on for years. So you can read what I wrote, and I will put the text on the screen of what I wrote for the Wire this week on this topic. It's a rather long Wire report, but I don't want to rehash everything here. But basically, one of the bigger problems with this is that in North Carolina, as far as I know, the pro-life license plate is a perfectly legitimate thing that the DMV offers. I think something like 30 states offer, pro-life license plates from the DMV. It's an official license plate. It's not like something you just make up. So you've got a law enforcement group with access to the state's law enforcement license plate database. Now they're calling these people terrorists. Do you see where we kind of cross the line, and we're now in a situation where we've got active duty soldiers targeting American citizens for protected speech? You see how bad this is? This is really bad. This is not good at all. It's not surprising. I don't want to say it's surprising at all, but it's not good because we have made the jump from extremism to terrorism very quickly with regards to what the government and what soldiers at low levels seem to think about us. That's another point that I think a lot of people tend to miss. This slide deck did not come from the Pentagon. This was locally produced, and this is anecdotal evidence at best, so I can't prove it. However, many soldiers are saying they've seen this slide at least 10 years ago. So they're saying that these slides are old, and the National Right to Life Council actually put this out as well in their response to this, which is that this is their old logo. This is not a logo they currently use. They retired this one several years ago, which means that this slide's been around for several years. So that kind of shows you what military law enforcement, with law enforcement of jurisdiction on U.S. soil, are thinking. At least at Fort Bragg, the largest military base, I think, in the world still. So, not super great. Fort Bragg, now Fort Liberty, due to the, name change scandal sort of thing. Fort Liberty has said, this is not official, this is not approved, this did not make it through its vetting process, but I find that hard to believe. What vetting process? There is no vetting process. Anyone who's ever had to do a PowerPoint slide in the military knows that some commander or some officer tells, an enlisted guy, to make a PowerPoint, some NCO or something, or some commander tells a junior officer to go, put together a PowerPoint on this and then give a training session. There is no, there's very little chances for, a commander to say, now let me look at your PowerPoint slides before you tell your guys about them. That doesn't really happen. I don't know why Fort Liberty thinks anyone would believe their lies, but there is no approval process. I mean, maybe there is. I don't know, but I've never, in my several years in the military, I never saw that. But in any case, Fort Liberty has not apologized. They didn't apologize for this. They didn't indicate that there's an investigation going. They just said that they will make sure that the slides don't get used anymore. But they've been used for years, so, there's that. WRAL, the local mainstream media kind of news affiliate out of Raleigh, has kind of started to open this can of worms and ask the questions of, well, why did the approval process for this PowerPoint presentation, why did it not work in this instance? How many people were in the training, and so on and so forth. So hopefully the mainstream media will look at this and see that even for an extremely liberal mainstream media source, even this is a bridge too far, because they understand the precedent that this sets, which is not good. So, again, another thing for the average citizen to be aware of is that this is a great indicator. How many slides were leaked? Just this one. How many soldiers did it? One. So how many people are in this audience and passively agreed with this and passively said this is okay? Only one guy, one brave soldier saw fit to take a picture of the slide and leak it, on social media. So, and this slide had been used for how many years? So how many thousands of soldiers saw this and agreed with it? But for now, really, this is all we've kind of got to go on, and really we just kind of have to look at this as a very rare case study, but it is a great opportunity to learn things as an American taxpayer. So again, I have no doubt that absolutely nothing will come of this in terms of the military. They will probably just ignore it. They don't really care. My guess is no one's going to get an Article 15 for this. If they do, it's probably going to be some random, NCO or specialist or something who's probably just going to take the fall for this, and the commander's just going to wipe his hands with it and walk away. Fort Bragg already did that on Facebook. So even after these sort of things, they can even if they were to apologize for this, this doesn't cover up, or this doesn't explain the mentality that was needed to make this in the first place. So that's the more troubling thing. I'm not going to sit here and waste your time and talk so much about this one PowerPoint slide that some random, service member made. They messed up. Okay, fine. Or they were given the slides from years ago and they just kind of went with it. They looked at the slides beforehand. They memorized what was on the slides. They didn't look any of this stuff up. So, I don't want to make a mountain out of a molehill, except for the fact that this is us looking through a straw at the top of a mountain, to continue the analogy sort of thing. So this is a huge indicator of the problems within the military, and I think that a lot of people are reaching the end of their patience with the military when it comes to things like this, because we have been given, since COVID, since the whole occupation of the Capitol, whole 65,000 troops in the Capitol sort of thing, or in the region to be on standby for events that are beyond our control. I think people are kind of getting a little bit miffed that when we ask the question of how many service members are going to stand up and do the right thing when it comes to stuff like this, I think we have our answer, and we keep getting our answer. And that's a little upsetting to come to the realization of. So I don't want to go on too much of a rant on this. I've spoken quite a bit on this in the past, and it's just one of those things to where if you can't understand why this is a problem, then I can't help you at this point. So let's just go ahead and move on to the Southwestern region. Changing topics quite significantly, let's talk about Hurricane Beryl making landfall in Texas. Looks like it hit the Galveston area pretty hard. For a couple of days there were a little over 2 million people without power in the region. So far as of this morning, according to the power outage tracker, there are a little over 760,000 people still without power in the area, but power's coming back online pretty good. So it made landfall as a Category 1 or slightly less than a 1, but yeah, it's just kind of a good reminder to always have good alternative power generation methods. Moving over to Western Europe, let's switch gears again and talk about the election in Paris. So again, European elections have kind of swept through the continent, and there have been various little interesting notes and tidbits that have kind of occurred, most notably in France, in which case you've got a couple of things going on. So for those who don't really follow or care about European politics, this election was kind of interesting in France because there were a couple of things that happened. One, it solidified the control that the Communist Party has over France. And when I say Communist Party, I'm not saying that entirely derogatorily. I mean that they're literally the French Communist Party, and their allies have not a majority of seats, but they are the largest political bloc in France right now. So we have that sort of thing. being, culturally sort of accepted in France. And you can see here on the chart, these dark red, dark burgundy dots show all of the seats that the Communist Party and their allies have. Now, this is something that needs to be kind of sort of mentioned, is that this red, scary burgundy communist bloc here, that's not just one party. That's, I think, 4 parties put together. So you've got the Green Party, you've got the Communist Party, you've got a couple of others, like the Socialist Party, and a few others as well that kind of add up. They've already formed themselves kind of a coalition before they kind of stick together in a block themselves. Whereas on the other side of the aisle, we have Le Pen's National Rally. Now these sort of royal blue dots, that's Le Pen's National Rally, and that is one party. So this is something to keep in mind. You've got a couple of things going on here. You've got one, Le Pen losing to the communists, and that sort of being paraded around social media and the internet. And that is a fact. That did happen. Le Pen did not get as many seats. National Rally did not get as many seats as they were hoping for. And this sort of right-wing surge that was expected throughout France didn't really occur. Whereas a left-wing surge absolutely did. Now, on the other hand, National Rally did get more seats than they did before. So they didn't get the majority they wanted. They didn't get the majority they predicted. But they did get more seats. So you've got a couple of things going on here. One, the media is trying to downplay the gains made by the far right in France. So they don't want to point out that the far right, well, by French standards, they're all really leftist by American standards, but the far right in French standards, they want to downplay this, while at the same time they want to amplify the influence the communists have in France. So the fact that there is a French Communist Party is probably disconcerting to the American taxpayer, just because we have a hard time rationalizing that. But, France is France, I guess. So this is something that's probably going to matter, because generally speaking, it's really hard for an American to care at all about European politics. However, really just kind of keeping a very loose look at what's going on in Europe is kind of a very rough barometer for how things might go in the United States. So it's not entirely accurate to say that, I guess, but, really the sort of immigration issues that the election has brought to France, these are really good indicators of what Europeans are thinking. Le Pen sort of rose to popularity based off of a largely, anti-immigration platform. And, that being accepted now in Europe is starting to become a little bit more palpable. So, again, I know not a lot of people are interested in it, but I thought that it was it's very interesting that throughout the UK, we may see the extreme far left gaining seats, say, like prime ministership of places, like in the UK. However, that doesn't mean that European standards far right groups are not making gains of their own. So, again, it really just kind of highlights the turmoil that's going through Europe right now at the behest of some of these issues that we also are dealing with in the United States. Now, wrapping things up with the South China Sea, or rather the entire Pacific Theater in general. Over the past couple of weeks, Chinese activity throughout the theater has increased significantly. Now, the grand question is, why? And what does this mean? Well, let's talk about what's happened so far. So China and Russia have gotten really buddy-buddy over the past few years, but especially lately, in which they have conducted a couple of, or at least one, maritime patrol with each other. They get their ships together in a sort of formation, and they do this sort of, power projection patrol sort of thing. So that has either happened already or it's ongoing. It's really hard to say, because both China and Russia have not really been super open about what they're doing in terms of naval forces, and it's basically impossible for us to find out where they're at sea. Once they get out of sight of land, there's not a whole lot of resources we have, especially considering cloud cover in the region. The U.S. military, the U.S. Navy knows exactly where these vessels are at, but for the average observer, it's, we kind of got to guess a lot of times. But in any case, we've got large-scale naval exercises going on throughout the region. Now, the first instinct that you might have is, are these really drills, or is this a preparation to invade Taiwan? I think they're probably drills, just based on the sort of lack of coordination that's kind of really been sort of apparent, and there are a lot of other issues going on in China right now that mean that it's probably not an invasion. However, that's how China wages war. China really wants to make sure that we think that it's a drill when in actuality it's invasion prepping. Right now it's not super great. It's right in the middle of typhoon season for one. I personally think the typhoon season is probably not that much of a factor for China in terms of military actions in Taiwan, even though that completely goes against all previous doctrine. The long-standing doctrine that the United States has kind of agreed upon is that China can only invade Taiwan during a couple of months of the year when Taiwan season is over and before the extreme weather of the other seasons kind of kicks in, and we're not in during those windows right now. However, I don't know. It seems like China probably is most of their military is theoretical anyway, so maybe they think they can do it. Maybe they've gotten a sort of hubris-based doctrine like we do now. I don't know. It just seems like China Taiwan is it's not the time, at least not yet. Now that may change in a few days or a few weeks or a few months. Who knows? But it doesn't seem like now. It seems like right now China is really heavily invested in power projection. So a few days ago they sent one of their first maritime freedom of navigation patrols, taking some language from the U.S. Navy on that. They sent one of those patrols down to the Philippines economic exclusion zone. They've been really, really active down there in the Scarborough Shoal. They've been super active at the Spratly Islands. And just a few days ago, I'm surprised it hasn't hit the sort of prepper clickbait news, but a few days ago, the U.S. Coast Guard said that they had intercepted a task force of 4 Chinese warships just 100 miles off the coast of Alaska, so way up in the Aleutian Islands. I don't know if that's the farthest China's ever gone in terms of their naval forces, but it's pretty far. Like, that's a long way from China. And I'm really surprised that, the sort of very inflammatory-based clickbait news sources haven't picked that up yet. But the Coast Guard's up there. They've been shadowing them for a few days now. Just again, another presence patrol. They're inside our economic exclusion zone, so they are within our EEZ, but they're not within our territorial waters. So they're not within the 12 nautical miles of land that we consider to be our homeland defense sort of thing. So again, China's just trying to poke us, just like we poke them. And the fact that they're doing it with Alaska is kind of interesting because Russia's kind of doing the same sort of thing. So again, China is getting busy. China is definitely trying to project some power. They're trying to assert dominance in the Pacific, just like we are. We're building new bases all over the Philippines, Japan, places like that. So the Pacific pivot, as we call it, the transition to a more adversarial relationship between the United States and China, and the United States wanting to maintain the security barrier, the safety barrier that the Pacific offers. We're still a little bit paranoid about World War II and how Japan attacked Pearl Harbor and sort of things like that. So that's why we maintain this big expansive ocean between us and China. Whether or not that's justified is up for you to decide. I'm just explaining how things have historically worked, and now China's trying to encroach on that a little bit and kind of assert their dominance throughout the region as well. So again, something to keep in mind. Just keep your eye on China. I'll do the same, and we'll see how this all works out. My guess is that China is probably going to amplify things. Things are going to get probably a lot more confrontational, especially as we get close to the election and the domestic political stuff we're going through right now, especially with regards to the confidence that the international community has in our ability to militarily react to things and politically lead the military. Well, that confidence is completely gone, I think, and when the teacher steps out of the classroom, everybody starts sharing notes. You know what I mean? So this is a sort of situation we find ourselves in. tough times, and it's only going to get a lot more sketchy, probably a lot more concerning as the election gets closer. But all of this is to be expected. So let's go ahead and wrap things up today with the intercepted GhostNet reports. A lot of people were talking about the hurricane in Texas. A lot of information coming on that. My antenna was not in a super great situation. Was not in a great, arrangement, and I again had a pretty good thunderstorm come through right at the same time as the window, so I wasn't able to get too much through my own personal antenna, but I did pull this from a web SDR all the way in Pennsylvania. So people in Texas were talking all the way to Pennsylvania pretty clearly. So there were some dropouts here and there, but for the most part the messages came through pretty good. So again, I wasn't expecting too many people because this was the comm window for this. Again, it's a routine, radio network sort of thing, but it occurred during the quote-unquote big boy press conference that was supposed to be going on, to where, it's supposed to be like a major White House press conference. And I think the memery of the absolutely atrocious result of that press conference sort of had people all over the internet and not really on radio. So again, one of those things where people were kind of paying attention to something else and didn't really have enough time for radio this time around. But again, people were talking about the hurricane, so very good to see a lot of information on that, especially firsthand information. We have someone who is literally on a generator. See right here, they're on day 4 of no power from Hurricane Beryl, so they were still able to hop on GhostNet and send us an informational report, and that is very, very handy. That is exactly what this sort of thing is intended to be used for. So thank you all for that, and thank you for participating, even though it's a rough time. This is exactly the sort of thing we need to be thinking about, which is when your power's out, you've got no water, no food, or you're dipping into your supplies, and you're in an emergency situation, but still being able to convey information and be operationally effective and help other people out. That's absolutely fantastic. So we need to do more of that. So that's pretty much all I have for today. There are a lot of stories that I didn't cover, but again, if you want to follow throughout the week, I put out these reports pretty much every single day, Monday through Friday for the wire reports, and then these come out on Saturday. So again, if I miss something, chances are I probably covered it throughout the week. For those of you who are looking to get some more rapid pace stuff, again, I'm tweaking things here and there, but for the most part, this is kind of the schedule that we're kind of on for now. So that's again pretty much all I have, and I will see you next time. So thank you all for watching, and we'll see you then.